always love that part. Well, now that school's out of the way, and I have a little bit of free time before I start working for the summer, and I have absolutely no time for any reviews, possibly. Let's begin with reviewing Star Wars Battle for Naboo for the Nintendo 64. So, with Rogue Squadron being a huge hit, and with Star Wars Episode 1 coming out the following year, it felt appropriate for Factor 5 and LucasArts to make a game that centered around Episode 1. So, a year after Episode 1 was released in theaters, Battle for Naboo was released for the Nintendo 64 and for PC. Now, the thing you'll notice that's really different about this game is that even though it's set during Episode 1, it's not exactly an Episode 1 game. And what I mean by that is that none of the main characters from Episode 1 are in this game, except for maybe, like, I think Captain Panaka, I think is his name, who was the leader of the Naboo forces, I think. But aside from that, there's no mention of anyone or any appearances of anyone in this game who were in the original movies. Instead, it's all focused around this protagonist by the name of Lieutenant Sykes and his leader, Captain Keel. And basically the whole plot is centered around battles and events that occurred during Episode 1 while Naboo was under the Trade Federation occupation. So, aside from that, I'm not going to really go too much into the story. It's something that it's probably best left to experience while you're playing this game for the first time. So, when this game was released, a lot of people compared it to Rogue Squadron, primarily because of its similar controls and as well as similar graphics. Now, what stood out from Rogue Squadron is that in this game you're able to control land vehicles as well as water-going vehicles, I guess. So you can control a Trade Federation gunboat as well as various other speeders like the Flash Speeder, GN Speeder, and the Heavy Staff. Now, for the most part, they control fairly well, though the Trade Federation gunboat can be a bit sloppy at times, and its shooting is a bit slow, and can even be pace-breaking in the game. And missions like the one that's shown here on the screen now, you know, kind of should be a bit confusing in terms of what you're exactly supposed to do. But aside from that, like, the game's pretty straightforward in terms of what it wants you to do. And in terms of flying craft, you're able to control the N1 Starfighter, the police cruiser, as well as the Naboo bomber. And overall, the ships control fairly well, though the Naboo bomber is the one craft I have the biggest problems with. This ship controls like a tank. Now I know what you're thinking. It's of course a bomber. It should be controlling very sluggish and not be very acrobatic compared to a fighter. Well, here's the problem. The problem is that the level design at times can really go against the Naboo bomber. And the mission you're really going to hate the most will be, I think it's called the Queen's Gambit. One of the final missions before you reach the end of the game. And holy crap, are your bombs not very effective at times. I mean, they're useful against tanks, but I don't know, it's taken me a while to figure it out. I think you're supposed to block the convoy's movements, but I mean, those bombs are completely ineffective against MTTs, so I mean, maybe I'm doing something wrong here, but for the most part, I hate this mission. This is one of my few complaints against this game. And another are the space battles. As for the space battles, it can be very hit and miss in terms of how you're going to be able to find enemies or any kind of objects. Now, the one thing this game has been praised for is that it has a really good draw distance. And I think even as a matter of fact, it's supposed to be better than Rogue Squadron, and it's supposed to be one of the best draw distances in any Nintendo 64 game. But here's the problem. In space battles, because that draw distance is virtually non-existent, there are times where enemies can just pop up out of nowhere. And then there's also this moment where you'll start seeing lasers flying at you from both behind as well as even up front. And they're coming from straight out of nowhere. And you can wind up being killed just by random laser shots or an enemy sneaking up behind you. And that can be a real pain in the ass. And also the lighting in space, seeing that even Rogue Squadron didn't really have any kind of open space battles. So, with that out of the way, those are really my two complaints against this game. Aside from that, everything else works in its favor. Now, graphically speaking, this game looks pretty good for an N64 game, and especially a later N64 game. And I even think that the graphics in this game are even better than Rogue Squadron. I mean, when I replayed these games for the review, I didn't see any levels that really had any bad textures or really any moments where the graphics were just plain awful, but I guess like with its age, it's really up to what your idea of what, you know, would be good graphics for an N64 game. I mean, I'm not too worried about how the game's going to look aesthetically, but overall in its gameplay, it's pretty smooth, aside from what I mentioned earlier with a few complaints regarding some of the spacecraft. And only other thing too is that, like, just the difficulty is that, like Rogue Squadron, this is one of those games that, at least on the last mission, and maybe even a few other last missions, I've had to resort to using, you know, infinite life in order to continue on with this game. But then again, this is a game I played a lot more when I was younger, and even then I still had a lot of difficulty with it, but who knows. I may try to let's play it, but provided I don't die so much, it all depends on how that goes. So, as mentioned earlier, you can enter cheat codes to either give you infinite life or to unlock, you know, hidden materials within the game, or to unlock levels that you would normally get through the gold, bronze, and silver medals that return from Rogue Squadron, or to unlock completely weird stuff like recoloring your ships. But aside from that, if you play this game through, you can also unlock other things, like unlock concept art, unlock music for the game, or if you just want to use the more direct route like I did and just enter a code and just get it over with. So with that all out of the way, Battle for Naboo, it's an interesting game in terms of its concept. I mean, when you really think about it, this could have been used as a plot device, I guess, for Episode 1 instead of what we actually got in the movies. I mean, certainly if you could figure out a way to merge Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon Jinn, all the other main characters in Episode 1 and merge it with this story, having it just stay in Naboo. Like, one of the complaints I remember hearing about Episode 1 is that the movie has really no one cohesive narrative, I guess, or plot. But I'm not going to get into the whole, you know, prequel versus original, why George Lucas is a terrible director kind of stuff. I'm just going to stay out of that for now. But along with that, overall, Battle for Naboo is a pretty fun game. It's something interesting to do if you have nothing to do on a weekend, you feel like just playing a Star Wars game. And with that, it's certainly a game I'd recommend. It's debatable if it's my favorite N64 Star Wars game, seeing I like this game as much as I do Rogue Squadron. And well, overall, like in terms of Star Wars games, it could be debatable also with Shadows of the Empire, since I haven't fully played that game through, so maybe one day I'll get to a reviewing that, provided if I ever find a copy of it. And that's Battle for Naboo. Well, that didn't seem too much trouble. Wait a minute. Weren't there 2 Jar Jar figures here? Oh.